Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again for this new Wednesday with us with two new speakers and two new topics to be discussed. And we call it not an ordinary webinar. We call this Zipinar, as we're trying to zip in two important informations in just a short period of time, as we value your time, but we value us always as well for you to acquire new knowledge from very seasoned, experienced professionals like what we have today. And also, for those who wanted to be guest speakers, you can also visit our website, www.LetUsTalkIt.com, which is hosted by Cogent Integrated Business Solutions, the company behind this Zipinars, who wish to give back to the community by creating an empowered and informed community through free knowledge sharing platform such as the Let Us Talk It Zipinar. And without further ado, we actually wanted to present with you the first topic that will be discussed for today's Zipinar. First is future of leadership. So how leadership has changed in recent years. So leadership, as we perceive it, changing every day. In this conversation, we ponder upon what's going on to be the future demands from leaders, how they can meet this with self-awareness, compassion, and understanding of systematic issues. So we have Ravi Chatterjee, leadership coach and facilitator, who will be sharing with us his experience and knowledge with regard to the topic. And he is an experienced coach and facilitator with exposure to delivering talent solutions across the Asia Pacific region. So he has over 20 years of experience in coaching, leadership development, talent development, behavioral learning, and organization effectiveness. He has delivered learning and talent solutions in organizations like Dell Technologies, Deutsche Bank, Verizon, Convergys, Corporation, etc., and all other achievements that he has. And without further ado, let's welcome Ravi to give us a topic and let us know about more about himself. You
Thank you, John, for getting me onto this. I think, is my audio clear to all of you? Just wanted to get a confirmation on that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it's a great opportunity. And, as you said, we are in this world of zipset speed, right? And it's very important that we kind of keep it crisp at the same time, talk about what is extremely important. It's a great opportunity for me to talk to an international audience like yours and bring some of the thoughts that are relevant. So being in this business of leadership and leadership development and talking to various leaders at different levels, and I'm not just talking about the C-suite, right, which is what typically is thought to be the leadership, and they are the ones who are going through change. But today, if you also see, there is a lot of change that is impacting other levels of leaders across the organization, and leadership as we perceive it. So, traditionally, if you look at the role of the leader has been to produce performance, to produce profitable organizations which can do more with less. So profitability is basically the ratio of cost to ratio of production, and ultimately what you get out of it is how much you make. But in many ways, the pandemic and things that have happened around it has upended some of these beliefs. So what is the need of an organization? What is the job of a leader? Is the need of the organization only to generate profits, to become more profitable, to give its shareholders a fair run for their money? Or is it also to kind of be socially responsible? Now, social responsibility per se has been getting a lot of lip service from the corporate world for a very long time. But in the context of the current times, it's no more corporate social responsibility, but well-being of the society at large, which has become of utmost importance. So you can't, really be thinking that I have a great office and my office is all glass clad and, the air inside it is all air, pure and ventilated and everything is pretty fine, if there is a squalor outside your office, because that's where the next big threat is getting generated. The threat could be political. The threat could be that of a pandemic. The threat could be that of a kind of an economic unrest, because those are the people who are also going to buy, in a way or the other, the products that you create. And I'll give you an example. I come from India. I come from this city called Hyderabad, and we have these swanky offices which are as good as anywhere in the world. Once you enter them, you really don't feel that you are in a different location. But then reality stares at you when you come outside. And many of us who have worked a significant part of our time in IT, we kind of separated the two. And we thought that we could live with these separate identities for a very long time. But it hasn't been so. Many of these IT companies actually create softwares which go on to building the supply chain for the companies in the FMCG sector, in the hospitality sector, in so many other sectors. So if you are creating a software for an FMCG company and that FMCG company is not doing well, or the people around your office or around your society are not able to buy those products, where are you going to get the next project on your order book coming from? Right? You just cannot be oblivious of people around you thinking that you have acquired the skills and your company is going to deal with what it has at hand. So what does it therefore require a leader to be in the current times? Firstly, leaders need to see that things are interconnected. Easier said than done. Everything impacts every other thing, right? We always said that globalization is in, and it's been done to death, and we had a reversal of globalization with political forces like Trump, etc., coming in. But if you today see, the war in Ukraine actually impacts all of us. A disease breaking out in some part of the globe impacts all of us. Fed increases rates, it impacts all of us. So if you typically see the way the Asian market has been behaving, with Fed increasing its rates and inflation skyrocketing almost unseen levels of double digit in Europe, and I was just watching some figures. Germany is experiencing double digit inflation, and probably it hasn't done that since the Second World War, and so is UK, right? Now, what does that mean for us? How does it kind of impact the project that we are going to handle as leaders for our companies? So these are questions that stare at us. These are questions that require the leaders to become a lot more holistic, right? The threat is global. The threat is local. The opportunities are global. The opportunities are local. Now, let me bring to you a very simple way of how systems have got disturbed. Moonlighting, the elephant in the room, right? Many organizations in the service sector in the Asian economies are, especially in the Indian space, are kind of grappling with this phenomena called moonlighting. And the same organizations which kind of are really crying hoarse about moonlighting are the ones who have perpetuated contractual labor. It reminds me of Shakespeare's Macbeth. When you do the violence for yourself, you are a pariah. You are Macbeth. You are somebody who's tragically doomed to fail. But when you perpetrate that same violence for the king, you are a patriot. Now that's true with the employee today. When he's trying to earn a little extra buck, he is kind of quote unquote termed to be a cheat. But the same person when he's kind of given a boot because somebody decided to carry a kitchen sink into the office is absolutely should be fine, right? Now, in this unsettled atmosphere, what happens to the values of loyalty, employee engagement? Who engages whom? The ideas that we had for our employees to be engaged, the ideas that leaders used to manage performance, help people stay motivated, are not going to work because they are in the middle of an unseen time that in their lifetimes they have not seen. I mean, probably you can only draw historical equivalents of similar times when the Spanish flu, followed by the First World War, and then followed by the Great Depression, and out of that came out the big upheaval of industry that we now have experienced for the last century. And probably out of this upheaval will come out newer areas of digital transformation and threats, which people like Harsh are going to discuss in the next segment. But, and I don't want to kind of transgress into his territory, but I must say this, that while we keep on talking about digital transformation and digital being the solution for everything that ails the economy today and will help us to grow at scale, what we need to become digital is a certain mindset, a mindset that is backed by intellectual honesty and humility. Honesty to the purpose that, you know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. Don't fib it. Be ready to embrace the new generation, which obviously knows a lot more. Might be helped by the experience of the leader, and be humble enough to be with them, connect with them, communicate at all times, communicate honestly, right? Take ownership where it is required, right? Give ownership where it is required. Yes, John, I mean, if you have a question on that.
So,
saw you.
like with regards to the topic, like what has changed in the role of leaders compared to before and like the recent?
So one of the big things that has changed, and if I may just kind of give you the watershed, leaders were supposed to be leading from the front, right? Leaders were supposed to be people who would be leading like a general, the military kind of leadership, right? Where they would go to they would do what they would be expected to be the master of whatever things that their army is good at. But today, if you look at it, the new way of leadership is leading from behind. If I were to invoke that biblical image, it's more of a leader who stands on that rock and sees his flock, the shepherd who looks at his flock moving ahead. And one amongst them is that sheep which has capability and kind of casts the way. The job of the leader is to see that there are no threats, there are no wolves in the flock. So in the corporate context, the job of a leader is to see that the ecosystem is maintained, that people are allowed to grow and thrive, they are provided the proper opportunities to express themselves, create more democratic spaces where artificial boundaries of departments, rules, procedures do not hold back creativity, right? Because if that happens, time, I mean, look at it. I mean, what were the certainties that the leaders dealt with? They had investors. Right. Now, investors are being completely dictated by central banks. So your share price doesn't go up or go down because how you're performing, it goes down by what decision the central bank of a particular country has taken. So that's out of the window. Second piece. Are you able to take your goods and services to the people that need it? The supply chain disruption brought about by the recent global wars, etc., has said that we can't do that. Look at it. For the first time, America experienced formula milk scarcity. Unthinkable. Right? Unthinkable. The kind of energy crisis that Europe is going to go through, probably the winter is going to be really cold this time. And And that's the kind of a situation in which the leader is working. The only place where the leader can create a significant impact is with his or her own employees, and treat them as partners in performance. Treat them like you would like to treat others, because they are the only people who you can directly influence and impact. And if you want to influence, that will not be by that alpha male leadership which would lead and everybody would follow them. It requires humility. It requires compassion. It requires the ability to listen. It requires emotional agility. And more than anything else, it requires the ability to forego the templates of the past and adopt to changes as it is happening. So very open mind, right? So often we talk about growth mindset. That's a very famous slogan. But then it's not about growth. Today and nothing can be, we actually don't follow growth mindset. What we are interested in, using the methods that we have used to create growth. Now that is very different from growth mindset. Growth mindset basically means, you are down on your knees today and you will be up and running tomorrow, looking at tomorrow as a challenge. Now that is not possible for the hero worship that we have kind of given leaders. Look at it. Look at the political firmament. Which country has a strong president who has a global voice today? Gone are those days of Gorbachev and Reagan or even Clinton and Yeltsin. Or look at what is happening in UK, right? You could have only imagined that to happen in a tin pot banana republic, right? So many prime ministers in so little time. So what does it require a leader to be? So that's a very important thing. The second piece is, you and I as individuals, we are also leaders of our own destiny. Now, the first thing that we need to start doing is stop hoping or stop believing that corporations are going to make our careers successful. That is not their job. Treat your career like an entrepreneur. Treat your career like a guy who needs to open his shop every day, see to it that the supplies are in, knows what his community requires the most, sell what is required in his community, and look forward to grow at scale and sustainability. Look yourself like a business entity and lead yourself with that degree of rigor and personal empathy. Instead of thinking that somebody else is going to come and give you a certification or is going to produce for you an opportunity, stop fighting for promotions in your organizations. That's not going to be the way, right? This is a different kind of meritocracy we are talking about. A meritocracy which is not only governed by the levers that organizations have. Now, for example, we need to ask ourselves, what percentage of our salaries are we spending on personal development? At least 10 to 15% per annum needs to go on that. I would even go forward to say, pick up a loan if you don't have that kind of money. Get yourself the certification, pay it back. It will pinch you. But that is what is going to make you thirsty to get more out of yourself. Nobody else is going to come and do it for you. Right? So that is the leadership that I'm talking about. And that requires tough choices to be made. That requires a different way of leading life, as much as it requires a different way of leading organizations and leading teams for leaders. Right? So no, at a corporate level, no leading from front, let people grow. And for people to take that position, they should be handling themselves as entrepreneurs. So that's my key message.
And it is said that like being a leader is also being a servant at the same time. Like, is there cases that it's beneficial to the recent times in the corporate world, or is it being abused?
I think it has been used as a slogan or being abused as a slogan for a very long time. Servant leadership. right? And people have been talking about it. But there are very few who you can actually find who are servant leaders. Because leaders are filled with the hubris of who I am, their own leadership voice. And that drowns the voice of the collective in their organizations, right? There are there's a study that only goes on to say that only 2% of the leaders believe that we all are great. Almost 75% of them reverberate in the echo chambers of saying, I am great. So if 75% of the leadership is saying, I am great, which basically means you are not as great as I am, and you're working for that leader, what kind of servant leadership would you be experiencing? And let me correlate this, John, to another data point, Gallup study, which goes on to say that, almost 70% of employees across Fortune 500 companies are either disengaged or are actively disengaged. And therefore, quiet quitting and moonlighting should not come to us as a surprise. And this data has actually improved with the pandemic. Before the pandemic, it was around 84% in the 2019 survey. It has come down because some of them have lost jobs, some of it is important, etc., etc. Certain geographies have started doing different. And I'm saying that organizations need to do different things. Think differently. During COVID, look at it. It came out that how do you show yourself as a caring organization? Send a bottle, send some dry fruits, send some goodies. Every organization started doing it. What are you trying to tell me? I'm fighting with a deadly disease at home. All that I need is a water bottle? All that I need is a packet of dry fruits? And that will boost my immunity forever? And that is leadership? And that's a template that has been replicated across organizations without thinking. Now, that's where I said, stop and think. So there's another important thing, John, if you ask me. Leadership has always been associated with a lot of action. As a leader, you need to act. You're known by your actions. You're known by the acts that you perform. But if you today look at, today's leaders will be known by the thinking that they bring in. Think. Pause and think. What are you doing? How can you decide to take off 50% of your workforce by one fell of an axe? And what precedent does it set for the rest of the industry? Right? You get where I'm coming from. So that
Yes.
those are questions. You're disrupting an entire system. Well, fine, go ahead, disrupt. But this is not sending like a space craft to the atmosphere or to space. This is something much more than just putting an electric car on the road. I'm not saying that what was happening was perfect, but to create that imperfection, probably this kind of amputation is not the only way.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally agree. And also one last thing, what should we be expecting to the future leaders or the future leadership that the corporate world should be looking forward?
See, they need to bring in a lot more of compassion and understanding of people. You will probably see a lot more young leaders. You're seeing a lot of young leaders already, but even in the traditional industries, you will see a lot of young leaders bringing forth some of the humane values once again. Values of caring, values of looking after each other, values of camaraderie. I think it's going to turn the corner very quickly. Because if it has taught us anything, it has taught us that the only way we can survive is through collective thinking. The days of individual brilliance are gone. The days of individual brilliance are gone. And honestly, the shelf life of a patented idea or an objective is not more than 3 to 4 years anymore. Somebody else finds a way out and they kind of deal with it. So you're not going to get a Thomas Alva Edison kind of a capitalist anymore in the 21st century. Things will change very fast. Things will change very much. I mean, if you have seen, people are already leaving Twitter and joining many other platforms. So if you thought that it's going to be a one-way street, perhaps it is not going to be. Not very many people will care to have that blue tick. Right? So what you can expect from leaders is compassion. But at the same level, at the same time, be compassionate to yourself. You got to carry your own can. Deal with your own career like an entrepreneur. Don't expect a multinational organization to give you everything that you think is important for you in life. That is the biggest mistake that the last generation of the 20th century has made. For the better or worse, we all need to learn a lesson from that.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Ravi, for that
Thank you.
very insightful discussion with your topic. Now, we wish to open the question and answer section. We have a few minutes to take care of. Okay, if any from the attendees have question to our speaker, please unmute, or you can put it on the chat so we can address the questions. And while we are waiting for the questions, if in case anyone would get this or will be watching this on YouTube and all that and wish to have further collaborations with you, how would they get in touch with you?
So I have a small firm of myself. We call it ARIV, Alpha Romeo India Victor. ARIV is actually means quest for knowledge in two very ancient languages of the world, Tamil as well as Sanskrit. So I do a lot of work in coaching, so they can directly write to me at ravi@ariv.co.in, or they can visit our website, ariv.co.in. And we will be more than happy to, they can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm there on Facebook. So it would be a great opportunity for me to stay connected. I think, as I said, the unit of progress will now kind of get broken down to the individual level and do what is required to be done at that level. Right.
Wow, fantastic. All right. So I think the message is delivered very clear, as we don't see any attendees raising their hands or opening their mic for questions. But again, if you wish to get in touch with Ravi, you can definitely send him a message on LinkedIn or send him emails
Right.
on the email address that he had mentioned. And for those who have missed this first part of the session, you can actually watch our YouTube as this recording will be uploaded there. All right. So yeah, thank you so much, Ravi, for the.
Thank you so much, and over to you. And thank you for those searching interventions that you made. Right. Over to you and Harsh.
Yes. And so yeah, sending my thanks to you again, Ravi. And now for the next topic that we will be sharing with you today in this session is cybersecurity at speed and scale. So cybersecurity contains quite a few sub areas which can be tricky to manage at scale and speed. So we have speaker here, Harsh Nath Jha, information security engineer at Elastic. We'll talk about how you can manage all of this at speed at scale like a boss. So he is a security researcher, author, and speaker having experience working with Fortune 500 as well as ground-up startups. He likes to talk about application security, InfoSec, bug bounty, DevSecOps, and software development. And not to take too much time in introduction, let me have Harsh take care of the session.
Yeah, sure. Just a second, Phil and Harsh. Harsh, thank you for joining in, and thank you, Ravi Chatterjee, for your time out for this platform. I just want to remind you that after Harsh's session, we have a startup pitch. So anybody is interested can stay back. So we have a startup called Mild Cares, and Sandeep Vyas, who is the founder and CEO, would be doing the pitch to our investors. So anybody who's interested can stay back after this session. Yeah. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, please, Harsh, please go ahead.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much. It was a pleasure listening to Ravi, the concepts that he shared, especially about the servant leadership and the cause behind moonlighting and stuff. So yeah, that was actually helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And people who are watching us live from different platforms, I want to welcome them. So this session, it has been informative so far, and I'll try my best to keep it informative for the rest of the time that we are going to have. I'll quickly share my screen because I have made a PPT at the 11th hour. Let's hope it's decent enough. Please let me know if it's visible for you. Okay, looks like it is visible, and I'll just click on
Yes,
slide.
it is now visible. Harsh, thank you.
All right, so the topic of discussion for today is cybersecurity at speed and scale. This has been kind of a tug of a war between different teams because we all have been struggling in order to, keep up with speed as well as scale. Because if we care too much about speed and scale, we lack in cybersecurity. So we'll think about it. We'll look at a few points about how we do stuff and why we do, and what's the need of it. Now, my name is Harsh, and I'm a security researcher. The next slide is dedicated to my introduction. And this picture, that's not me. That's my picture performing at a concert in my band. I am into music very heavily. And I'm a security researcher, full stack web developer, bug hunter. I have written a few research papers for the likes of Springer. I like to talk about application security, InfoSec, about DevSecOps, bug bounty, and pretty much everything about music. So without further ado, let's take a deep dive into it. Now, to discuss the agenda of today, we'll be taking a bit overview about what are we trying to, even convene here, what are we trying to discuss here. We'll try to understand the problem. We'll see a comparison between speed and scale, and why do we even need to discuss about it. We'll talk about the sweet spot, as in how we, kind of set a balance between speed, scale, and security. And of course, some closing words from yours truly, and we'll have a Q&A. So about this entire thing, I'll just read it out because I've written it with a lot of mehnat. We have always have this tug of war in terms of speed and scale, like I discussed earlier. So if you are building a startup, or if you are working for a huge product, you'll definitely want to finish stuff in time, or maybe speed it up so that the product that you are building can be built in less number of time, and you could market it more, you could reach more people. And while working at startups, I've worked at 2 startups so far, and one thing that I've seen in common in both the environments is we are always short on time, and no amount of time is enough. So we always want to do stuff in the least amount of time we can possibly do. But since some of the startups, especially in a country like India, where the startup ecosystem is really blooming, they really take off very, very fast. And because of that, what happens is you have to scale your infrastructure, your application, and everything inside it at a speed never seen before. And when you focus on speed and scale, you can kind of only have 2 variables in the equation. You can either have speed and security, you can either have scale and security, or you can have speed and scale. But then that's kind of not enough. And when you keep security at the focal point, you kind of have to compromise with either scale or speed. But what if I tell you it's easier than it seems to have a perfect balance between all these 3 things? And a lot of companies have been doing that. How are they successful in doing that? Let's take a look. Now, understanding the problem, speed versus resilience is my first topic of discussion. So if you are building a software on speed, you kind of tend to miss a few points where you might compromise on resilience. So suppose I have, let's say, 5 checks to pass before I finally give a go ahead to the software to go into the production. And if I really have to keep up with my speed, and I absolutely cannot compromise on that, and let's say 2 of my checks have not been passed yet, I'll kind of feel like skipping that. I'll kind of feel like, let's see what happens. We'll do some checks in production. So that will make our application, or rather our software, less resilience in simpler terms. So there's always a tug between speed and resilience that we have to solve. Other one is scaling hand in hand with security like a boss. That's one of the major challenges that I've seen. In case if your organization has a lot of clusters, it's running on Kubernetes infrastructure, you have a lot of buckets and whatnot, you will always have to scale at a massive rate if your organization is growing fast, or even if you're setting up an entirely new infrastructure. So you'll have to scale it really fast based on the needs. So even as your team expands, you will have more requests incoming for performance testing and whatnot. So keeping security hand in hand with the immense rate of scaling, that's a challenge. The other one is defending against attacks on your systems and employees. One of the most recent examples is the attack we all noticed, that was against Uber, and a couple of more attacks. If I cite the example of SolarWinds, so these were some of the most memorable incidents in the past where we could definitely learn a lot from. Now, how ready are we to be able to defend attacks, that we face, and how do we do that? So I believe that these 3 are one of the topmost issues that any organization, be it a startup, be it a very, very huge company, we all face. And having worked at even a Fortune 500 company and even startups, I can see that the similarities are really cunning. Next, now the question is, what would you actually pick? Would you pick speed or would you pick scale? Even if I talk in the context of this session, if I have to cover a lot of items, I'll either have to pick up speed if I want to cover all of them, or if I want to discuss all of these in detail, I'll have to, slow down a bit and I'll have to explain all the concepts. So how do I kind of find this perfect balance? To do that, we have to ask ourselves a few questions. Do we allocate budget to back our security teams? Now, these budgets can be in terms of hiring new people, hiring good talent. It can be in terms of tools that you invest. Yesterday, I was talking with the CEO of one of the security companies in Bangalore, and we were discussing about something called log security. And the crux of the discussion was a lot of the companies, especially in India, even the startups, they don't want to spend in areas like bug bounty or other managed security services or even third-party pen tests, because we kind of have a belief that if something has not gone wrong yet, it will not go wrong in the future, which is not the right way to look at it. So do we have our budgets allocated for these things? Do we have enough tools that we need? Because a lot of things can't be done for free. For example, if I cite a few automatic scanners, let's take the name of Nuclei. So these things would certainly give you some insights, but you can't really replace these free tools in the name of the more premium ones. So I don't want to name the paid tools because I don't want to endorse right now. But there are a few tools. I can probably take the name of some AWS tools. For example, AWS Card Duty, it's an expensive tool. But then ask yourself, does the organization need it? Would it be helpful if you have an eye out, if you have a third eye looking at your entire infrastructure and scanning it every moment to be able to identify and inform you of any threat so that you could mitigate in time? So do we have the budget? If not, we need to talk about that. Would you delay a release if security checks have failed or are incomplete? So this is another sensitive question. Suppose you have a big release planned on 7th of November or 10th of November. Would you delay your release by a week if your security team found some really serious issue at the 11th hour of release? Would you do that? If yes, we are on the good track. But then if not, we need to talk. Because more often than not, this might happen. And in order to keep up with speed, we might overlook some of the more critical things. In one of my very recent projects, we encountered a scenario where I cannot complete the entire security scanning or audit, whatever you name it, in time. And because of that, we had to go into production without having all the checks complete. And that was a devastation. And why did I not have time? Because of speed. We had to deliver it within that time frame. And if we compromise with that, then we are actually inviting the issues to take home in our application. Now, what's the average age of open vulnerabilities? Let's talk about that. We all have different bug monitoring tools in our organizations, namely Jira. Some of us do it in GitHub. So some of us even maintain items on a simple Excel sheet. Let's ask ourselves, what's the average age of open vulnerabilities, and what's the average age or what's the average time you need to close a certain vulnerability? Let's even classify it in terms of criticality. Let's talk about how long do you take to fix a critical issue? How long do you take to fix a high severity issue, or a medium or low, or even an informative? So that actually talks volumes about how serious are we as an organization for security. And how do we do if in case our vulnerabilities are open for way too long? First of all, to be able to solve it, we need to address that we need to have a proper SLA document or a very strict rule where if we say that we're going to close a high severity issue in, let's say, X number of days or X number of hours, we need to be very strict about it. We need to review these things, and we need to definitely reduce the amount of time that we take to resolve each open vulnerability. Now, this can be in the context of an application or in the context of an entire cloud infrastructure, and we need to do that. And while I say that, let me also stress on the fact that regular patching of cloud resources or the services that we are using, it's more necessary than not. Because if we are acting in a reactive way, that we'll keep on patching stuff as we discover some issues, or as if some new CVs has been discovered. But then let me tell you, having a reactive approach is never at all important, as important as a collaborative approach. So we need to be proactive as well as reactive, because a few things have been need to be taken action upon when they actually happen. But then we need to be proactive in the areas where we need to do patching or update our libraries or anything like that. Now, the next question that we need to ponder about is, how much of security work are you delegating to the developers? Because in an environment where developers are writing code, so it's very safe to say that the developers are the ones who write bugs. Not deliberately, but then yeah, they do. And it happens. We can try to minimize that, but then we can't really eliminate that. So my question here is, how much are your developers aware about security? Here's the analogy. If I have 5 developers on the team and all those 5 people are really versed about at least the basics of security, they are aware of the OS top-down attacks, they are aware of things like SSTFs and stuff. So if they are aware about those things, they'll be able to accommodate those things into their process of development. I have a question in Q&A. It says, how do you handle technical debts that resulted into a security issue, and how much does it impact the MTR in production? Sure, that's actually a very common thing that we have, especially in startups, because when we talk about speed and scale, if we miss something, the stage 1 of our development cycle, it kind of gets carried up to stage 10, stage 15, stage 25. The application might have millions of users, and we kind of still might have those things. And that's a real challenge. What would you do? Would you stop your current work, whatever that you're developing, whatever that you're expanding? Would you do that and get rid of the technical debt, or would you kind of ignore it? So my point here is very clear. It might not sound very orthodox or very mainstream, but then I believe that what we need to do is we need to analyze the proper scenario. What's the amount of debt that we have? Is it too huge? Are we still using some legacy code or some legacy packages which are outdated or even vulnerable? And based on that, we need to do a proper analysis of the amount of risk that it poses to us. Now, if it has a lot of risk, or if we can rather categorize it in divisions like critical, high, medium, low, or whatever. So based on that, we'll be able to allocate proper time to that, and we must eliminate that debt from the ground up that we can. So whenever we are developing the next module of it, the next section of it, we can make sure that we start eliminating the technical debt right from there, and we revamp the entire thing. Because here's the picture. Suppose that your organization is on level 100. I'm just quoting an arbitrary number. Let's say that your organization's entire code base or entire infrastructure can be quantified by a number 100. So if you have some debt today, it will be easier to resolve rather than if your organization really expands and now your quantification is 500. So now your technical debt is 5 times. And we need to address that as soon as possible. So I'd say we can definitely, pause for a bit and, try to do that. If the elimination of debt requires mandatory downtime in production, what would happen? Okay, that's again a good question. If that requires downtime in the production, we need to talk with the management. How ready are they for that? Because if it's mandatory, then when we say mandatory downtime, then it's inevitable. You need to cause downtime either today or tomorrow. Today, your organization might have, let's say, 1,000 users as customers, but then tomorrow, who knows? You might have 10 million users or 100 million users. Would you rather like to have a downtime then, or would you rather have it now? So I hope that answers. And yeah, the next point that we have is, do you have a mandatory security training program? Because some of the breaches that have occurred in the recent past are a result of employees being not that well accompanied with the security concepts. So we need to conduct trainings with our employees. So if I'm a developer or if I'm part of a technical team, I definitely need to be trained about the OS top 10 attacks. Some of the most common things that have been taking place in our day-to-day life. If I give some names, so this is the attack called dependency confusion, which has been surfacing a lot in last few months, I'd say. So how ready are our developers to tackle those kind of scenarios? How ready are our non-technical employees in terms of tackling things like phishing or rather spear phishing? How ready are we for that? And if we are not, let's have a program and let's address it. Now, moving to the next point. Yeah. How do we achieve the sweet spot? And this will also involve the both the questions that we had in the Q&A section. So in order to achieve the sweet spot, we need to do a few things. And some of those are establishing a proper secure SDLC, which is software development lifecycle. I've written software development cycle for some reason, but then it's lifecycle, pardon me for that. So how does it differ from a regular software development lifecycle? How do we accommodate security in all the stages? So if I broadly classify the SDLC, it would be the basic information gathering of what we are trying to building a design document around the same. After that, we actually start to write code, then we test, then we deploy. That's kind of the summarized version of what the normal software development lifecycle looks like. Now, when we accommodate security in all these different phases or stages, how would it differ? So while we do the requirement gathering in our first stage of software development, so in the same parallel line, what the security team can do, or rather what your trained developers can do, is gather the different information about the libraries or packages that we might need to use in it. Now, in the second stage, when we are about to draw the architecture diagram or of our thing that we're trying to build, we can have a threat modeling in that phase and try to eliminate any issue that we identify through that. Now, the next stage, when we are writing code, pushing it into GitHub or whatever our software is to maintain that, we can establish a proper pipeline where you scan every piece of code, every line of code, invest in a good code scanner, try to do manual code reviews, and doing that, we'll be able to eliminate a lot of stuff that might be a pain in the future. The next stage is when we test the application for the functional resiliency, whether or not the application is working as intended. So the security team can actually go ahead and do a round of pen testing around the same and try to see what are the controls that can be bypassed. The next is when we deploy it into the production or any environment that we choose to. Now, at this stage, the security team or the DevOps or the developers themselves can check for the misconfigurations, because security misconfigurations have unfortunately been one of the most popular sources of attacks that environments have, that the companies have seen. So that's how we would kind of implement security in every stage of our regular SDLC. The other area is SSTF, which is extremely underrated and extremely important. It stands for Secure Software Design Framework. Now, this is nothing but just a standards or a collection of standards and processes that the developers and the teams and the especially technical teams have to follow when developing a piece of software. And this document, why do I stress so much upon it, is because even if some of the people in the technical teams might not be that aware about security, but then if they kind of follow these checklists, so things would be really easy and feasible to understand and follow rather. We have another question. For an organization that has software being built, so actively developed for a decade, but doesn't have any security capabilities as of now, what would be your approach to bring in these pointers into engineering flow? Sure, that's something that a lot of legacy companies, a lot of technical giants have been facing, because they all have these legacy softwares that's being built for a decade or even more than that, and it has a huge technical debt. And how do we answer to that? So let's start today. I mean, there's nothing better than starting off today and try to analyze where have you been lacking. Have you been having regular pen tests? Have you been patching them in time? What's the average age of open issues? What's the technical debt look like? Are we using any vulnerable packages? Do we have some central repository where we are maintaining the list of packages and stuff that we are going to use in the long run? Do we have a secure software development design framework? Do we follow the secure SDLC? If not, let's start today. And whenever we plan to revamp it, let's do it as soon as possible. And even if it requires you to cause a downtime, I mean, still fine. And some downtime is always better than having a long-term downtime caused by some external hacker. So that's what my advice would be. Since we are running out of time, I'll just cover the other concepts. Now, the other thing that I'd like to mention is DevSecOps at the core. So DevSecOps is not at all a new concept. It has been there in the industry for quite a long time. Now, for those who might not be familiar with it, I'll just try to explain it in a single line. It's when the DevOps and the security team works really close in line with each other. So what that does is it kind of eliminates most of the risk from ground up when you're setting up an infrastructure or even scaling it. So what that would do is, even if you are scaling at a really immense speed, setting up a proper DevSecOps flow would eliminate the risk of having vulnerable cloud components. So that would be my take on it. Other one is security first culture. Recently I was at a conference where I met the architect from one of the leading startups in Bangalore. we were talking about how once his organization had a very major release planned, and they actually delayed the release of an entirely new feature by an entire 10 days, just because their security team identified a really critical issue at the 11th hour, so 2 days before the release, and they needed a week to fix it. So when we have a security first culture in our organization, things become really, really easy for us. Creating security champions. I mean, what are security champions? I totally understand that not everybody in your technical team cannot be fully trained as a cybersecurity engineer. That's not feasible. That's not possible. Let's not talk about that. But what we can do is, since we talked about having regular security trainings in our tech teams and even our non-tech teams, we can create a culture where we are teaching people regularly. We are letting them have exercises about security. We are doing adversary simulations on them. We are doing control phishing attacks on them, just to see who falls and who not. Now we can choose and identify several people who would like to step up and learn a bit more about security, so that whenever their team has a question about security, instead of rushing to the cybersecurity team, they could actually get it answered from their own colleagues, from their own team members. So what that would do is, it would kind of take the heavy burden off of the cybersecurity folks' shoulders, and promote the security first culture in place. And the last point that I want to say is automate, automate, automate. Automate as much as you can. Automate for your code reviews, automate for your pen tests, or automate your scans of your infrastructure. Automate everything that you can. Write scripts if you have to. Automate the API testings. I know that some of this require you to spend some money. So please go ahead and spend some money on some of the good tools to automate stuff. Even if I have a good team, even if you have a large team to take care of your entire thing, still try to automate as much as you can and focus on the things that can't be automated. Because believe me when I say this, cybersecurity can never be fully automated. So let's focus on automating those areas that we actually can. And I believe that brings me to my closing words. In closing, I'd like to simply summarize whatever that I've been saying so far. Number one is get rid of technical debt as soon as you can. Even if it requires you to cause some downtime in production, please go ahead and do that. Identify what's the time when your users are least active, or if you can have kind of a setup where you have production and staging running in parallel. So you could plug into staging while you're fixing stuff in production, and vice versa. So that would be my first point that I want to highlight. The other one would be having a very strong security first culture in your organization. Train your employees. Try to bring in adversary simulations. Try to have security champions in all the different teams. Try to have multiple security champions in your teams. Try to patch everything regularly. Try to minimize the averages of open vulnerabilities. If possible, host open bug bounty programs. If possible, host internal bug bounty programs. And try to be really insecure in your mindset about security, to try to be very unsettled about this. And yep, things will go on as planned and in good sense. So with that, I'd like to conclude. If you want to connect with me, I'm available on Facebook and Instagram as Metal Sapien, because that's my music persona, but I do answer my DMs. I host Q&As on that. And I'm also available on LinkedIn at Harshnath Shah. And yep, that would be my end of the session. I'd give it back to John.
Yes, thank you so much, Harsh. That was very insightful. And thank you so much for, well, there was no name on the interaction for that who were giving questions, but it was really great. Thank you so much for that live interaction with the session. And yeah, as mentioned earlier, we have like the next hour will be used by Startup Pitch. So I'm afraid we'll have to end at this moment, but thank you for throwing those questions for Harsh to engage with. And again, as mentioned, you can contact him with the details on the screen. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining and participating, and for today's webinar, and for the topics that we have discussed and shared. And also, we are hoping to see you again next Wednesday at the same time, and we'll have 2 new speakers and 2 new topics to talk about in the same manner. Again, we wish you all the best and thank you and see you around next time. Thank you so much, everyone.